Looking to build your team's capability in service design, research, or human-centered design or service design and AI courses? This is HCD offers practical, hands-on training for organizations, tailored to your context, not off the shelf. Teams at Verizon, AIB, Flutter, Accenture Song, Gusto, local government, government departments, and NGOs across Europe have all leveled up through these programs. To explore what's possible for your team, book a free 15-minute call. See the link in the show notes to find out more. Now let's get back to that episode.
10x your service design offering with Smaply. Take 20% off any order with This Is HCD 20 off. Let's superpower you and your design team's potential. Sign up at smaply.app. Enjoy the episode from your friends at Smaply, helping support This Is HCD podcast.
Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of This Is HCD. My name is Gerry Scullion and I'm a human-centered service design practitioner based in the beautiful city of Dublin, Ireland. Now, before we jump into this episode and tell you who our guest is, this is quite an emotional intro for me because this is the last time that I'm going to be recording in this space. I've produced This Is HCD out of my attic for the last 7 years, almost to the day in this space, and I'll be moving to a new premises in the coming weeks. But I just wanted to give it a bit of shout out to this space. It's provided us with lots of interesting conversations over the years. But today I'm joined with Louise Dennison O'Shaughnessy, Director of Mental Health and Wellbeing at EHS International. Louise spends her days inside organisations, helping leaders and teams navigate stress, burnout, culture, and everything that sits under the big umbrella of well-being at work. This is a conversation that's going to be fascinating for a lot of us because we all probably feel and relate to a lot of those terms. And in this episode, we talk about what psychological safety actually feels like when it's present, and how unclear roles, poor communication, and toxic high performers quietly damage teams, and why people so often leave people, not organisations. We also get into the inner stuff of negativity bias, and why so many of our thoughts lean negative, and how busyness and stress can become addictive, and some very practical ways to build healthier boundaries with work and technology. Here. We reference lots of other conversations that we've had on the podcast, and we speak about things like simple habits like walking, rest, and leaving your phone in another room. Small little pieces like that are very, very powerful. And by the end of this episode, you'll have a clear sense of what you can control, what you can't, and how to start protecting your own psychological safety at work. If you enjoy this conversation, please do leave a like and subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, please share it with your team. It helps us find new listeners and helps us grow. We're an independent podcast. I know you're going to love Louise. Please do check out Louise on LinkedIn. They're a fantastic person. I really enjoyed speaking with them. But let's jump straight into this episode. All right. Louise Dennison O'Shaughnessy. I'm delighted to have you on the podcast. Maybe for our listeners, we'll start off, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from and what you do, please.
Okay, thanks, Gerry. Nice to be here. My own name is Louise, as you said. I'm from Naas in Kildare.
In Ireland, for anyone who's not from Ireland.
Absolutely, sorry, in Ireland, yeah. Lived in Cork for 12 years. And I'm the Director of Mental Health and Wellbeing at EHS International currently. So I'm all things mental health and wellbeing, basically.
Fantastic. Now, when we were speaking before, a number of weeks ago, we were talking about psychological safety in organizations, right? And for a lot of our listeners, they hear this word, this phrase being used, and they're like, well, I feel psychologically safe in my workplace. But from your perspective, what does psychological safety look like and feel like when it's truly present in an organization?
So, I mean, there's so many ways in which you could answer that, but I suppose one of the things that springs to mind is people can make mistakes, fail, put their hand up, own it, and feel safe, and feel that their job is still safe, feel like they're not going to get punished for it. And one of the things in organizations is the ideal is to create an environment where people can fail and learn, as opposed to always getting it right or fear of getting it wrong.
So who manages psychological safety? Like, who's responsible for ensuring that it's present?
I think there's a combination. It depends on the organization, Gerry, because organizations, there can be,
Yeah.
Heads of HR, director of culture, director of people. But it's working with the senior leadership team as well, and creating an environment from the top down,
Right.
and embedding it, I suppose, into the organization as well, where people know, I suppose, what's expected of them,
Yeah.
and reminding people what good practice is as well, and having that everywhere within the organization,
In your experience, what are the kind of behaviors that departments or people who are responsible, like leadership, responsible for ensuring that there's psychological safety throughout the organization? Like any leaders that I've ever worked with, they're not intentionally going out there saying, I'm going to make this, I'm going to make the organization unsafe. But what are the kind of behaviors that you see leadership doing that can erode psychological safety over time?
Well, one of the big issues in a lot of organizations that I work with is a lack of communication. So people don't know what's going on. Sometimes as well, there can be a lack of clarity of roles. So people, don't know, like, how many people can honestly say they're doing what their job description says they're doing. Also as well, if people are reporting to different people, unofficially, sometimes it can cause problems departmentally as well, because people, are trying to please their line manager, but they're also being pulled in different directions, different priorities, etc. But with senior management and even middle management as well, they often, in fairness to them, don't have the time to allocate to things like well-being and psychological safety. But the thing about it is, if people are treated fairly and treated with respect, you're on their, if they work towards their values and are reminded of their values and get the training to be able to, I suppose, lead with those values in mind, and it's embedded within, and they have time to do it. One of the big things with job design is allowing time for middle management and senior leadership to incorporate some of the KPIs that would go with wellbeing.
Yeah. Like the pressures that people are being put under in their day-to-day jobs to do more with less is one of the factors that I keep on hearing more and more about when I'm speaking to designers and organizations. What can organizations do about that? Like when the pressure is so great, it's so immense, and that surely has an effect on psychological safety, where they feel like there's a case of, overworked here, I'm not being listened to. What advice do you give to those organizations and those leaders that are listening to the podcast, and what can they do to ensure that they can manage that better?
Well, there's a combination of things. Make sure that anyone that leads a team is trained in mental health and wellbeing on how to handle those tough conversations.
Yeah.
I would have a lot of my heart kind of goes out to sometimes middle managers, because they're getting it from above and below, and they're really under pressure. They don't know how to have the conversations and how to navigate them. Also, it's looking at your metrics. So, sometimes people say, oh, wellbeing, it's all fluffy and whatever, but it is, unless you have metrics, measurable outcomes that you can try and implement in your organization. Looking at, retention of staff, looking at percentage of managers that are maybe mental health first aid trained, looking at whether people feel safe within their organization, and like, can they talk to their line managers, etc. Looking at if there's turnover in a specific department, for example, you might have to do some digging around as to what's going on there. Retaining talent. If you're not retaining talent, the first people out the door in organizations is your top talent, if you're not treating them right. Like, people generally leave people as opposed to organizations.
Yeah, I love that phrase.
Your line manager can have more impact on your mental health than your partner.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a good relationship with your line manager, it massively impacts, your day-to-day life in a job, But there is a lot of things like training, looking at metrics, and then looking at the information they receive. Like, sometimes people say, oh, we can't get people to fill out surveys. I was only talking about this morning. with a company, a large company. And I was like, well, some of the things that work quite well is if you ask your employees to fill out a survey, bring them all, like do a town hall, get everyone to the canteen, have printed copies out for everyone, have coffee and maybe pastries if the company can afford it, give them half an hour. Lads, fill that out and then have a coffee before you go back to work. So allocate a specific amount of time for them to actually do that and then listen to the results. So take on board, you asked, we heard, we delivered, and advertise it throughout your organization. So a little bit of transparency as well is really good for employees.
I've got both personal experience working as a full-time employee, but in instances where people see sort of like lots of toxicity within an organization, and they raise that to senior management and nothing happens. Even if there's mental well-being training in there and there's mental health training in there, what in your experience is lying behind that? Like we can talk about the importance of having training, agreed totally. But when you see toxic behavior living on in organizations, what are the options available to people based on your experience and expertise?
Well, when in organizations, when there are toxic individuals that aren't addressed, and then often you get back, but they're a top performer or whatever. There's some research out there where you have it's the Marines and the top Marines in the Army in America or Navy SEALs or whatever they are. One of the top trainers said that you can have top performers, but there's a lack of trust. People don't trust them, whatever. They never get picked for Marine teams. They were asking what the criteria was to pick them.
Wow.
And pick the top people. And it's the people with medium to top performance, even low performance, but high trust. So when that's not matched, so if you have a top performer who's very, very toxic, it's like, having a bad apple in your fruit bowl.
Absolutely.
It spreads. And then if people think that kind of behavior is acceptable, well, other people, again, it can impact their behavior as well. And it creates a really not a nice environment for people to be in. And if you have an environment that people don't want to be in, eventually you lose your good people.
Yeah, and absolutely, because you kind of understand that certain organizations produce a certain type of individual in the way they think and the way they're kind of formed, professionally speaking, obviously. So you kind of expect that kind of behavior from certain organizations because they kind of live by those values, even if they're not the values that are on the wall. That's one of the things that I kind of like. You see, like if you look at something like Meta, they're like, connecting the world, but they don't have anything up there around destroying democracy or any of these other interesting and more fundamental pieces on the wall. But that's what I would perceive an organization like Meta to be, whereas the actual values are different.
Exactly. I mean, it's back to, are we aligning, like even a director of culture in an organization would make sure that the company is working in alignment with their values. If one of your values is trust, and there's no psychological safety, we have a serious problem here. Like, you will not retain good people. You will lose good people. And the cost of retaining new people is too expensive to do that. So, with organizations, it's always down or nearly always down to what it costs. And I respect that. I had my own business for 10 years. I do respect that.
Yeah.
But it's easier to retain people and look after them than new hires and the whole process of recruitment and starting training again and losing talent and maybe having the same problem in the future as well. You have to your people are your greatest asset.
Absolutely. You mentioned when we were kind of doing pre-chats for this podcast around self-awareness, and one of the pieces that presumably you cover whenever you're training organizations is creating those spaces for people to reflect on their own kind of makeup and how they actually see the world and what they can bring to the workplace. what do you think is so critical about understanding our thoughts as human beings rather than just reacting to them?
So one of the things I am really passionate about covering is teaching people to understand how they think. According to the National Science Foundation, 80% of our thoughts for your average person are naturally negative, and 95% of those thoughts are repetitive. 80% are negative and 95% are repetitive. So we have a negativity bias, and that's thanks to our ancestors being on high alert for dangers and whatever. And thank you, ancestors, we're here. We survived. But
that's just in Ireland, or is that globally?
No, it's global.
It's a human instinct.
Yeah, and we're designed to look out for dangers, and we become hyper aware.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this doesn't really serve us in today's world. And what happens is, you end up either becoming, well, I use the term negative Nancy's, no offense to any Nancy's out there, or Debbie Downers or Debbies. And I just mean, you can either become one of those people or be surrounded by those people, and the impact that can have on your mental health and actually your functioning in general, your thought, your logical brain, your prefrontal cortex is huge. It's very detrimental. It shrinks the front of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, if you are constantly negative. So teaching people to understand how they think, understand their stressors, understand their reactions, and reminding people as well, I suppose, of what is in their control and what's not in their control. And other people's behaviours, thoughts, attitudes are not something that's in your control.
Yeah.
I
remember in 2008, this was the first time that I was starting to, I guess, question my own mind. And I've been seeing a psychologist for over 12 years. And one of the most remarkable kind of moments in Eckhart Tolle's first book was the shimmering light through the window and being able to separate your thoughts from your identity. And I really resonated with that at the time, and not seeing my thoughts as the truth. So what advice do you give to people other than read Eckhart Tolle's book, which is a long book, by the way, The Power of Now? But how do you get that through to people in an organization that maybe, because that took me a long time. It took me, probably a couple of years to really connect those two dots. And when you're being asked to train an organization and you probably have maybe 20, 30, 40 people in a room and they're like, oh, here comes Louise again. She's going to be talking about that hippy dippy stuff. How do you get over that challenge? Because it is like sort of mind blowing, and there's a mind shift there that can occur when you connect those two and you start to really question your own thoughts and question the truth.
I think,
how do you do it?
Yeah, I think one of the big kind of aha moments for me was when I realized that our thoughts are not always true. Our thoughts are not always true, and understanding that we as humans will constantly look for the logic to understand things.
Yeah.
So your thoughts in turn create your emotions, which in turn can have a knock-on effect on your behaviors.
Yeah.
And when we separate, I suppose as well, identifying, people around us, if they are people that we need to implement boundaries with as well. Because if somebody is constantly negative, like if somebody's stressed, like the amount of groups I would have, and I'd ask a question like, how many people here have been stressed in the last week and month and year and whatever. And
I thought you were asking me.
Absolutely. And with that, when people are stressed, the stress hormone cortisol can literally leave your pores and enter someone else's pores physically. So if you work in close or live in close proximity to someone who's always stressed, you can physically absorb their stress. So remembering,
but also a little bit. Anyway,
there's that too. But I think is to just to be aware that there are things that are really good for our mental health and our thoughts. Like when people are struggling, I always say to them, get back to basics. Look at your water intake, look at your nutrition, eat crap, expect to feel like crap. I have this fight with my teenagers daily. My skin's really bad. I need X cream. And I'm like, no, you need to stop eating crap. Nutrition, sleep, look at your sleep patterns, look at your screen time before your sleep, look at your exercise, look at your, exposure to sunshine. Like when we are looking for the negative in every situation, we'll find negative in every situation in life. And you keep looking and it grows. You know, the line, the neurons that fire together, wire together. So your brain and the deep grooves, the more you do something, the deeper the groove in your brain, it becomes like your default system. So when people are like that all the time, I suppose it's educating them to create an awareness. And like, you can bring a horse to water. After that, it's up to them. But at least if they have the education piece, they can make a conscious decision.
Yeah.
You know?
In high performing teams, as you mentioned there's, for whatever reason, like there's a kill or be killed attitude to, getting ahead in this world, like, and for a lot of people in organizations, especially sales organizations or design and innovation teams, they're under immense pressure to get stuff out in a certain time frame. And when you go in and you presumably you do this brilliant training on mental health and well-being and some of the daily practices that we speak about. There's like these two different worlds. They're not in kind of unison with each other, where there's, fast, it's up for the kind of the fight attitude. And then there's the other side of it over here, where organizations where you have to be vulnerable. You have to be like, well, I'm going to go into my space here and I'm going to practice some mindfulness, or I'm going to do some meditation. And they're kind of in conflict. How can organizations enable that to become the norm, as opposed to like, here's, as you said, Debbie Downer, they're going to go over to do their mindfulness. They're into all of that stuff. That stuff seems to be that mindset, I mean, is what's holding the organization back.
Yeah. So it's, I suppose, it's the mindset piece, isn't it, really? I mean, there's, there's growth mindsets and there's closed mindsets. And if people aren't aware that maybe they have some unlearning to do, you can't teach them. So when you have groups, like when sometimes people say to me, Louise, how do you embed, this idea from within the organization, not just do a training session? And I'm like, training session is only part of the process. You need to get buy-in from senior leadership teams. And sometimes it's just identifying one member of the senior leadership team, and getting them to fight your corner and, like, turning up to wellbeing events, like, it's looking at, it's a balance, when you're like in a high pressured environment, it's being able to identify what your boundaries are.
Yeah, sure.
When is enough presenteeism, taking your work home, there's 7 different types of rest, not getting enough rest. People are on screens till they close their eyes at night and then they wonder why they can't sleep. People watch the news before they go to bed and then wonder why they're having nightmares, and we talk about the negative stuff, and yet we are like, what are you feeding your brain with? It's like your body. If you continue to feed your brain with stressful, negative stuff, the composition of your brain is going to be stressed and negative.
Yeah. So in an organization where busy and busyness and checking your email and responding to them, and all of these kind of habits that are throughout the corporate world, what do you think is driving that? Is it a fear-based culture, and what can we do to change that? Change that behavior, I mean, not the fear. Obviously,
I think it has to, like, in organizations, people have to, when they're off, they're off. Like, there is this mentality that, and COVID didn't help for that, because a lot of us were working from home. Well, you always have access to your computer and you could always respond. And, this, like, some people, I get emails on Sunday nights from certain people, in organizations, and, that's them. Whereas I know, back to what I'm in control of when I respond. So I have to create habits that serve me, and in order to create a successful habit, you attach it to another habit that you do every day.
Mm.
So in organizations, it's, to be honest with you, Gerry, senior leadership need to practice this kind of stuff. They need to practice it from
Walk the
top
walk.
down. They need education on what to do and how to do it. And then they need to practice it to show, because if, like, somebody said to me recently about, you know, they were doing all these wellbeing events, but there's very few people turning up for them. And I was like, okay, who is the most senior person in the room at the event? Oh, none of the senior leadership ever come to those things. I was like, why not? And they were like, oh, I think they're just too busy. And I was like, you see, that sends out a really strong message to an organization. If they're too busy, middle management kind of go, well, if they're too busy to go, we're not going because we have our own stuff to do. But at least when they prioritize this kind of stuff, people kind of take notice. You can't stick a plaster on a gaping wound, and like they have to be involved in it. Like, we all have unlearning to do in work, home, etc. You know, the 40 coats analogy. Have you come across that?
No.
So 40 coats Wonderly Wagon. I don't know if you remember.
I do remember that. Yeah, I didn't think you'd be old enough to remember Wonderly Wagon, but go on.
So 40 coats analogy is basically peeling off the layers that don't suit you and the traditions that maybe you don't like, and keeping the ones that you do like. And it's the same in a work environment. We can choose, like, companies need to make money. If they're not productive and they're not earning, they can't pay the people, they don't have a business. And I fully respect that. But also respecting that people are an organization's greatest asset is huge. No matter what they produce, their people are their greatest asset. And if you have a good team and, you know, a good group predominantly of employees that feel respected, are paid fairly, you know, treat them kindly like a human being, you generally get it back in spades. The return of investment is huge. But it's sometimes conveying that, because the bottom line is we need to produce X, we need to sell X. How do we do this? And sometimes the bigger picture gets lost. You know, I was reading a paper there last week about the cleaning staff in a hospital where instead of them coming in, doing their job, feeling not particularly part of the medical community, and you know, just feeling like they were on the lower end of the scale and, you know, a little bit invisible. They changed the narrative. They showed them that they were part of the solution to getting people better. And they brought them in. They included them in the entire process. And they said, what you do when you do it well helps our patients recover faster, reduces infection. And when you bring people in and show them what their part is in an entire process, they feel connected.
Yeah, that's love it.
Yeah, they feel connected.
Can you find that paper for me? Because it might be something that our listeners would like to read as well.
Absolutely.
That's kind of very much from a human-centered design mindset of including people and really understanding their role in the sequence of recovery. That would speak to an awful lot of the principles of human-centered design. So
absolutely,
that might be good. If we get it in time, we'll put it in the show notes, folks. So what do you think would it take for us individually, and that's not me and you, that's everyone else who's listening, to really find peace in doing less, but being more present? And the caveat to that one is, like, if you're seen doing less in an organization, your worth decreases and you're potentially at a higher risk there of losing your job. I think that's the kind of thinking behind this question. What can we do to feel more present, or find peace to do less in an organization?
So I suppose make sure that there's clarity within your role. So a lot of people that I come across, they don't know fully what is expected of them in an organization.
Yeah.
And they get pulled in every direction. Request, organizational charts. It's a simple thing. But who's reporting to who? Because sometimes people do get pulled in every single direction. 2, meetings. So when you have meetings, do a 5-minute window. So instead of 30-minute meetings, have 25-minute meetings, or an hour meetings, have 50-minute meetings. You know, when show people what, have leadership guides on what good looks like for managers. Have, you know, in meetings, show, like, there's one place, there's these placemats in the center of all the meeting tables, what respect and courtesy in meetings looks like. And although it's stuff we know, it's a really positive reminder, and people feel respected and heard. But with regard to your question about being kind of more present, it's having definitive boundaries and looking at what self-care practices work for you, and then implementing them into your daily life. Like, I personally, a couple of years ago, was coming down off an antidepressant, and a good friend of mine said to me, what are you replacing it with? And I was like, I don't know what you mean. And she goes, well, you're taking out one of your fundamental supports, and what are you putting in its place? And all I thought at the time was, oh my God, something else to do? Are you kidding me? Exactly, alcohol. So I was like, okay, and I had to go think about it. And every day, and anyone that knows me, that works with me, knows this about me, I walk every day at lunch. Hail, rain, shine. Of waterproof runners, of all the waterproof gear.
Good to you.
I do.
I didn't know you were a big walker.
I do. It's my sanity. And I say to the lads, they laugh.
You walk on your own?
Usually, or sometimes. Recently, a colleague of mine in the Dublin office walks with me sometimes as well.
Brilliant.
And it's my sanity. So looking at what self-care works for you and implementing it into your daily life and attaching it to a habit that you already do will make it successful.
I interviewed the authors of I can't remember what it's called, Busy Work, Brad and I can't remember the other guy's name, but anyway, we're talking about busy work, and walking is one of those things that you can do to alleviate the pressures, regulation and stuff. But like leaving your phone behind you, and that's one of the big things, because it's these little nudges and these vibrations in your pocket are like, oh, I'm on. We joke about being like a lab rat, but we are like lab rats.
It's anything that has a continuous motion, walking, running, cycling, swimming, regulates the nervous system. And the chronic busyness thing that we're all in, it's relentless. People feel that they are spinning so many plates they can't actually think straight. And it's carving out time for looking after yourself. People can actually become addicted to busyness and addicted to stress, you know, and it's looking like, when I'm in companies, I always tell them, like, happy salespeople produce 37% more profit.
Yeah, I would well believe that. Just on the caveat, like, I hate not remembering people's names. That was Joff Outlaw and Brad Marshall, who've been on the podcast before. Their book was Busy Idiots.
I like that.
That's a great one. You definitely should buy that one, Louise. I think you'd like it. It's called Busy Idiots. Busy Idiots. And if I get to catch up with you again, I'll show it to you here as well. Lean over into my bookshelf. That's that book there. It's really good.
I'll get that, actually. I like the look of that.
Learn the brain science and the productivity hacks to get ahead without the stress. I mean, it's a big one. And I'm actually going through that at the moment, about trying to disconnect. I've got my mobile phone for 5.5 years. It's been the longest I've been able to keep a piece of technology alive. It's here. It's an old Pixel, but unfortunately it's starting to die. And I want to try and get off. I want to try and figure out, you know what? They make it very difficult for you.
They don't make it easy.
They don't make it easy to get a phone that will just have a WhatsApp. And the only reason I want WhatsApp on there is because the kids in the school.
You do not hear? Do they do WhatsApp now?
They don't. It's like the Kai OS is the big thing. That WhatsApp isn't supporting it anymore. So I'd have to get an Android phone, and then if you get an Android phone with full Android on it, it gets WhatsApp on it. But then there's a whole kind of workaround that, unfortunately, I know that I do. I use the browser to access social media stuff when I'm on trains and stuff.
What I would say to you, actually, I met a guy recently on a course, and he had been diagnosed recently with ADHD, And he said he puts what's the word,
NOS
controls on his phone that blocks certain apps after a certain period of time, and he can't unlock them.
Okay.
It's controlled, and somebody else has the password.
Brick is one that you can use to smack your phone, and it just locks all the apps out for a specific amount of time. I mean, it's coming to that for me. Like I'm pretty addicted to social media, like YouTube and LinkedIn and stuff. But like, it's just being able to disengage and switch off. When I'm finished work is the big thing. I find myself scrolling, not being present and stuff, and it really affects. Doom scrolling.
Go down rabbit holes. I leave mine upstairs at night. I've started leaving it upstairs at night because I'm like, it's so, you just do it. You just, that dopamine hit, we're just after that little mini.
Absolutely. It's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
So just looking more on terms of integration and reflection, and we're coming towards the end here. Like, so I just want to try and understand a little bit more around psychological safety, and inner awareness and busyness and risk. If you're to look at all of those in terms of a kind of an interconnectedness of a system, what connects them all in your experience? Like that whole inner awareness, the busyness, the psychological safety, and the risk. What are the bits that connect all of those in your experience?
Do you mean for like
when you think about them, like psychological safety, inner awareness, busyness, and risk? Is there anything in particular that speaks to all of those? No?
As in how to improve your psychological safety?
Yeah, absolutely.
For yourself,
like,
is it?
Yeah, for you yourself, like when we need to think about our psychological safety, we need to think about our awareness, we need to reduce our busyness, we need to reduce the risk of serious health problems. Like, is there one thing that you can recommend to people that applying this can actually, like you mentioned, they're leaving your phone upstairs. That's a really, it's something so obvious, but not many people do it, myself included.
No, I get you. I suppose identify what your stressors in your life are and park what you can't control. Because, I mean, for example, every illness in the world, mental, physical illness, has risk factors. And there's risk factors that we can control and risk factors that we can't control. And the ones that we can't control, we park because there's nothing we can do. So only focusing on the things you can control. So identify your stressors and park what you can't control would be the two big things.
Like a 2x2 kind of matrix, and just retract what you can control. And then the last piece that I want to ask you, you mentioned you had 2 daughters and the future of healthy work. What do you think that looks like? And what advice do you give to them to really question and ask themselves each day as they move closer to the working world?
I think like it's kind of scary, all the AI stuff. I think if we don't understand it and embrace it, we've no chance in the future. Like, people are so worried about their jobs and AI and all that sort of thing. It's the people that embrace it and understand it are the people that will keep their jobs, and it's the people that refuse to engage with it are the people that will not, because it will time will move on, technology will move on. For the future, I suppose, with my girls, remember that, like, make sure that you enjoy what you do, like, and identify environments, learn how to identify environments that maybe, you put a plant in the wrong environment, it doesn't thrive and it doesn't grow. Remember, it can be the environment, not you. And sometimes people personalize situations when really and truly it's actually nothing got to do with them. People join the dots a lot of the time about, they might know 2 facts and they'll create their own narrative about those 2 facts as to how that occurred, and they might be completely wrong, and it ends up being like incorrect untruths that they end up telling themselves, and then they get emotion. They think about it, they create emotions about it, and then that can dictate their behavior, and they can be really low, or feel like undervalued or about something that's not even correct in the first place. So, do you know what I'm saying? So
yeah, absolutely.
just be mindful of what environments you're in. And remember, like, if you're not thriving and growing in the environment you're in, it might be the wrong environment for you.
Nice. Louise, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you? And, what kind of services do you provide for businesses also?
As I said, I'm a director with EHS International. So you'll get me there or on LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn nerd. I know. But also, I suppose all things mental health, keynote talks, everything to do with culture, mental health first aid, stress management. I do a lot of psychological safety, psychosocial risk assessments. I'm currently doing a piece for a large organisation nationwide, a video for they've 7,000 employees that I'm going to be doing a video on how to look after yourself. So empowering women, men's mental health, all those different areas I work within, and I think
you do everything.
In this space, I'm a big fan of. I love what I do. I love what I do, and I learn. Instead of watching the news and listening to the news, I'm doing courses, podcasts, you name it, because it's back to what I can control. There's nothing in the news I can control, but I can control my education. And as I said, I'm a bit of a nerd. Look at that poor Gerry.
Well, look, I wrap every episode on This Is Hate City up by thanking you, the guest, for allowing me to go in all directions with my conversation. These are unscripted podcasts, so we go with the conversation and we try and have a natural conversation as best we possibly can. Thank you for allowing me that space and that time to do that, Louise. I really, really appreciate it, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.